Oh, I just realized, my daughter isn't in here. That's good. I'm going to tell a story, and now she won't be embarrassed. Picked Claire up from Pittsburgh yesterday. She's done with her first year of college already. And as we were driving back through, along the turnpike, those many, many hours, Pennsylvania is such a beautiful state. If you travel that whole length, there she is, just in time for the story. And this is great. Now she'll be more embarrassed at this than the story. It's hard to hide from the preacher because I'm up high. So as we were driving along, and beautiful rolling green farm fields, and just looking at all of that, I remembered one of my favorite Claire stories from when she was a tiny person. We would drive back and forth from her dad's home in Media to our home in Lebanon, and one time when she was probably not even 5, from the back seat, she pipes up. We're like on the turnpike, like in Lancaster County, and she goes, "Oh, Mommy, roll down the windows. It smells like home." Manure. It was manure. So I just love, we grew up in like farm country, so it was just great that's the smell of home for like teeny tiny Claire. And it's actually a really great story, or metaphor for this springtime, which is the season of new life and resurrection. We manure, farmers put that on the field to get it ready for growth and new life. They're planting their seeds, so that up will come the soybeans and the corn that our farmers grow here in Pennsylvania. And I love that our Easter celebration is paired up with the start of spring. It wasn't an intentional thing. Easter is tied to Passover, unlike Christmas, where Christianity just picked a great day to celebrate as Jesus' birth, because we don't know when Jesus was actually born. We don't have a birth certificate or a hospital record, right? So when Christians wanted to celebrate the birth of light into the world, they picked a time very close to the winter solstice. Just after this darkest night of the year, we celebrate the birth of light into creation, Christmas. But Easter, when we celebrate life conquering death of new and eternal life, it's paired up perfectly with springtime. I just think it's a wonderful metaphor. And at springtime, we have to participate in that resurrection, just as we participate in getting the ground ready for the growth of new life by spreading manure on fields, or what I prefer to do, because it's much less smelly, is just use compost, right? I love making compost. Have you ever made your own compost at home, had a compost bin? Awesome, yay, Jules, up there, John does, Elizabeth, wonderful. Am I missing any hands over here? No? It's very easy to make your own compost. See me after the service, and I will tell you how. Actually, in the parish hall is the bucket that I use to collect all my kitchen scraps, which is just a repurposed protein powder container that I wrote compost on it. Like, you don't have to get too fancy with it. And the family, they just pile up all the banana peels and apple cores and broccoli stems all around or in this little compost. And it's like magic when you make compost. You're taking stuff that is trash, really. Otherwise we dump it just into our landfills. But you take this and you let it stay in a place for a little bit of time, with a little bit of water and some brown leaves. And in like 2 months, magic happens, and that trash gets transformed into compost, something that is full of nutrients that will help like our plants grow so much better into the plants we want them to be, just as God has placed us in this earth to help us grow to be the people God dreams we can be. And that compost, or in nature, those top couple of inches of soil that's really just leaves and plants piling up over centuries and breaking down, that is actually what the author of Genesis says God makes people out of. That compost, that topsoil. In the second creation story, not the first one where God takes 6 days to make everything and on the seventh God rested, the other one with Adam and Eve in it, the Hebrew word for Adam, we've taken to make a wonderful name. Yay, baby Adam, right? But all that word means, that Hebrew word Adam, it just means human, man. It means man, but like mankind man, not as much male gender man. It means mankind. Humanity would be probably a word or human would be a word we would say. But that Adam, that humanity, Genesis says that God formed the man from the topsoil of the fertile earth and blew life's breath into his nostrils. And in Hebrew, it's God formed Adam from the Adama. Adam and Adama. God formed humanity from the soil. A better translation for us would be if we said, God formed the earthling out of the earth. That's really what we should say, right? God formed the earthling. Or God formed the human out of the hummus, right? And that word hummus, with only one M. 2 M's you eat, 1 M you just let things grow in, right? Hummus and human are actually the same word from the same Latin root, meaning soil. And even in Latin, our word human is tied to the soil. We are tied to God's creation. And in Genesis, we're told to take care of God's creation. We are so intimately bound in it. We're formed out of it, and we're called to care for it, which is one of the things we are trying to do today with our bringing Earth Day celebration into the life of St. John's. And if you haven't been over in the parish hall after church, go over. Debbie Miller made beautiful little earth cookies and other wonderful Earth Day treats. And the Green Team has wonderful tables set up with the work and ministry that they've been doing this past year. But one of the things that even today's gospel story tells us, although it seems like it's just a story of Jesus, I mean, it is a story of Jesus' resurrection and appearing to the disciples. But the important point, one of the important points that the author of John's Gospel is trying to make in these resurrection stories, is that Jesus is not resurrected as a spiritual being. Jesus is not a ghost, right? Jesus is not a vision or an experience. The risen Christ is physical. Last week in the Easter story, Mary Magdalene meets the risen Christ. And John's gospel is like, John had Genesis, the start of Genesis in one hand, and he started writing his gospel in the other. John's gospel starts off with creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. That's creation, right? And then at the end of John's gospel, Mary's goes to the tomb by herself, and only in John's gospel does he locate that tomb in a garden, right? The Romans did not crucify people in beautiful places, right? John adds this likely made up detail of the tomb being in a garden. Why? Because God created humanity and placed us in a garden, in the Garden of Eden. And where is the first man, the true human one, placed for his resurrection, for his growth into new life? In a garden. And Mary Magdalene, when she sees him, she doesn't think it's Christ. She thinks he's a gardener. The Greek actually says the gardener. And I like to hear like capital letters, right? Not just like a landscaper, but the gardener, God, who is the gardener who created the garden for us to flourish in. The next time, and in that garden, what does Mary do? When she realizes it's Jesus, she's holding on to him. She's hugging him, just like I kept doing to Claire when I picked her up from Pitt and hadn't seen her since January, right? Until she was finally like, that's a lot of hugs, Mom. Back off, right? Just as Jesus says to Mary, don't hold on to me any longer, right? He's not like, ew, cooties. He's like, that's enough hugs. I've got other work to go do, right? And when Jesus appears to the other disciples, he's there in his physical body. Now, there's some spiritual essence to it, too, because he comes into a locked room sort of through the walls and just appears, right? But he's physically there. They can touch him. They can see him, right? He's not a ghost. That's why Thomas wants to see his wounds and touch his wounds to know Jesus is physically present, right? Not a spiritual manifestation. In resurrection, God hallows flesh again by having Christ fleshy resurrected. In Luke's gospel, the disciples, they're in their locked room freaking out when Jesus shows up. They think he might be a ghost, and he's like, I'm not a ghost. Look, I've got flesh and bones. And they're still kind of confused. They're like, yeah, that's what a ghost would say, right? And he says, do you have something to eat? I'm hungry. And then he eats some baked fish as his first resurrection meal, right? To prove that he's, right? Ghosts don't eat. We know that from every ghost story we've ever watched on TV or been told. Ghosts don't eat, right? I wouldn't choose baked fish for my first meal if I came back from the dead. I would want truffle fries and creme brulee, you know. I want something better, but baked fish, whatever. The point is, Jesus' physical matter is right there, right? It's not spiritual. Creation matters. Our physical bodies matter in this world. And we're called to go into the world to care for the created world. We're not meant to be like, oh, we're just going to wait around for the second coming. Like, you know, we can just discard this planet because we're going to get a better one next time. No, we're meant to continue to care for this place that God has placed us and entrusted us. I'm going to end with a few quotes from Pope Francis. Back in 2015, he wrote an encyclical, a document, based on why Christians need to care for our planet. Because we haven't been doing that great of a job the last couple hundred years, right? And so the Pope, one of the preeminent spiritual leaders for the world, whether you're Catholic or not, right? He wrote this beautiful document called On Care for Our Common Home. And he did it back in 2015. And a lot of sort of environmental policy makers and thinkers think that he gave sort of a nice setup for the UN, for them when they came out with their climate accords, and then taking that into 2016 with the Paris Climate Agreement that 196 countries then agreed to. A lot of that sort of work came out of Pope Francis's encyclical on care for the environment. And he wrote, what we need is an ecological conversion, right? Not spiritual conversion. We need to be converted to take care of the planet, whereby we will encounter Jesus Christ and our relationship with him in the world around us. Living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. Pope Francis says we are meant to be protectors of God's handiwork, right? Not exploiters of God's handiwork, right? We haven't done a great job protecting. He also says it's not, this isn't an optional thing that we can decide we want to do, right? It's not optional or a secondary aspect of our Christian experience. Protecting our planet is primary to who we are as faithful Christians in this world. And then the Pope went on with this sort of a beautiful, just naming that experience of finding God in nature. That beautiful sunset when you're like, wow, right? Standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. He wrote, the universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. The ideal is not only to pass from exterior to interior, right? He's saying that the spiritual life isn't where we should be only focused. We have to discover God in all things. And then the Pope ends with I'm going to end it with his words as if they were a prayer. He wrote, God, who calls us to generous commitment and to give him our all, offers us the light and strength needed to continue on this way. In the heart of this world, the Lord of life, who loves us so much, is present. God is present in this world. God does not abandon us. He does not leave us alone, for he has united himself definitively to our earth. The Pope says that God is in our very earth. And the way we treat our earth tells us how we're treating God. God's love constantly impels us to find new ways forward. And he ends with, praise be to God.